You can see from the picture there that I'm a recovering print reader. That was back in the early days when I'm still a recovery. That's right. I still print everything out. This is back. That picture was taken back in the early days of Highwire, when we still received print copies of every issue of every journal we put online. The library eventually expanded to fill the office walls. It was actually cheaper than decorating the office. And does that advance the slides?
You just press the arrow.
Got it. Thanks. I want to talk for a minute about who cares about what types of metrics, because what I found in Highwire's work on evidence-based decision-making, that it often matters whose perspective you're taking up. And you could certainly expand this list to include the library, government, funders, other very important stakeholders. I'm actually going to focus mostly on the author and the reader. We did a small study, interviews, essentially ethnographic research, a few years ago on the Stanford campus where Highwire was based, to understand what metrics mattered. And we interviewed researchers that happened they had recently published in PLOS One. And what we found was that when we asked them what metrics mattered, we asked them first as authors what mattered. And what they said was, all of them. All metrics mattered, especially what my funders care about. But then when we asked the same individuals what metrics mattered as readers, they said to us, citations, only citations matter. And it was, the irony was plain to them, of course, that this was the same person in the same 2-minute span saying this to us. And so that told us a lot about, as we put various metrics on websites, we build them into analytics decision support tools, that it mattered, that citations mattered a lot to the editorially focused audience. Now, I'm going to confuse you some because I'm going to talk about 3 types of impact, and there are different 3 types than Melinda talked about. And I'm going to use the word resonance, and it's going to mean something different from what Melinda said it means. So there you go. And we're friends. I found that in talking with editors about impact, if you use the word impact, it very quickly leads people to think of citations. And so I like to, and I think that's just too narrow a view, as I think Kent and Melinda have both talked about, that I like to swap that word for the word resonance. Things that sort of vibrate and make it have an effect going on forward. And I think that it helps to think of ourselves, suppose instead of being SSP, we were SSC, the Society for Scholarly Communications, not publishing. And you might get a broader understanding of the word impact from using it as resonance. Publishing has a very particular set of measurements of impact, whereas communications, we understand there's the whole web out there that has all these additional types of metrics. But among researchers, so the first for researcher resonance, as I said with our interviews, it was really measured by citations. To get an understanding of resonance among a readership, it was really best measured by usage. And I think that goes to Kent's points, especially when you're talking to clinical journals, the editors of clinical journals, to clinicians, to societies that publish clinical journals. They were interested in having an impact on practice. Well, you have an impact on practice by getting a lot of people to read and make changes in their practice. And then societal resonance is what's the conversation about? And here you have altmetric kinds of measurements, such as blogs, tweets, news stories about the research articles. And depending on the mission of a publisher or the mission of a journal, no one of these measures could be really adequate to talk about the total of resonance. So, for example, a society journal, especially one that's clinically focused, might have a mission to publish things of interest to its readers or to its members. So they might care not at all that they publish a certain set of articles that get a very high readership, but almost no citations. So in a clinical journal, this might mean that they publish a lot of case reports because people like reading case reports. You can see that in the usage data about case reports, but then when you go and look at the impact of case reports, you find that it's impact in citation terms. When we started talking to Highwire customers about how they wanted to understand impact better, we had to get past the idea that to some editors, and particularly editors of the very best journals, improving their impact, they would say, well, it just means accepting better and better papers. And that was a bit trivial. So we wanted to get past that, and we would go into looking at how were they measuring their impact. And you see that there were numerous metrics available. All of them have strengths and weaknesses for a particular purpose. I particularly noted that there are journal metrics, there are article metrics, and there are author metrics. There's H-index, there's eigenfactor, there's the journal impact factor, and so on. Phil Davis, not his most recent post in the Scholarly Kitchen, but I think the next most recent one, did a good post sort of summarizing the top N metrics and what the strengths and weaknesses of each one is. And I think it's a really good thing to use whenever you're going to work with a group of editors, because somebody will start talking about eigenfactor and somebody else will talk about journal impact factor, and they really are talking about very different things. But the key issue we found with the editors we were working with is that they were very, very interested in figuring out what was going on now. And the problem was that citations are not only a lagging indicator, they're a very lagging indicator. And yet these were editors who essentially wanted to lead. That is, they wanted to figure out what to do next, as opposed to what happened 2.5, 3.5, 4 years ago when that particular article was published. I mean, this is one of the challenges of impact factors, the very nature of the formula. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, it's just the fact of the formula has this long lag. You could even say, yeah, and if you use a 5-year impact factor, it's even longer. So we were interested in finding correlations. And I'll show you some of that work we did on the next slide. In other words, were there things that were less lagging indicators than citations, or even leading indicators of citations? And we did actually find some. But what we did find is that usage is not correlated with citations. And altmetrics, in fact, there are some studies out there that show that they're actually negatively correlated. That is, some of the articles that have the highest altmetric scores actually don't do particularly well in citation scores. That doesn't mean they're bad, it just means that they're resonating in a different way. So I'll show you some examples of that in the following slides. These are all done with Highwire's Visor suite of tools, the particular tool called Impact Visor. So our goal here was to support editorial decision making, which is an ongoing thing. And the decisions are very fresh, but the journal impact factor is about 1.5 to 3.5 years old. In other words, the articles that it talks about are several years out of date. So as I said earlier, we were looking for things that were either leading or less lagging indicators. And what we found is that it depends. That is, what correlates does depend on some field-specific kinds of things. I just lost the pointer. So, we might find that correlation between one factor and citations was 0.45. This is an R-squared. It's a measure of correlation where 0.33 to 0.66 is generally a moderate correlation and is actually pretty good. We might find an overall correlation 0.45, but when you looked in microbiology articles, you'd find it went way up to 0.7. When you looked in math, it went down to 0.36. And yet if you looked at usage, it was 0.04. That is the correlation of usage to citations. So this was important, I think, to help our customers understand what they could look at that was not as lagging as citations. And we did find some factors that they could use. Now, not correlations, but one of the things that we needed to help publishers understand was how the different types of articles they were publishing, and it could be article type, it could be subject of article, it could be any group that we create in metadata. We could group things by categories on the left. I've obscured some of them just so you couldn't figure out which journal I was visualizing here. But what this visualization let an editor see is that certain articles where this is visualizing the impact by section, where the orange line is the mean for that journal in that year. And so they could see that commentaries, which is this row here, was definitely helping their impact, and case reports were definitely unhelping their impact. And then they could look horizontally across years and see that, in fact, case reports was consistently dragging down their impact. And this could lead to an editor saying, all right, case reports are really valuable for my readership, so I'm going to take them out of my core journal and create an open access journal of case reports, which everybody could read and people would enjoy publishing. And clinicians, obviously, key among an audience for reading case reports. What they could also see by reading horizontally here is that commentaries were very strong in 2016, but not consistently so. So that might be the kind of thing where you'd have to go and drill down specifically on different articles to say, well, are we seeing a trend, or did we just have some really particularly hot commentaries? Another thing was to help editors understand what we called cliffhangers. That is, which articles are aging out of the impact factor in each year as the window moves on. And in this case, we helped an editor who had just seen their impact factor drop by 50% in 1 year to identify that there were 2 articles that contributed about 30% of their impact factor for just 2 articles. And they aged out of the impact factor. So we could account for a significant part of their drop. And this is just a good thing for our editors to look at year on year to see what's dropping out and whether they have really hot articles replacing them. And then just a final visualization, rather than looking at specific articles, which that previous slide did, is to look at an aggregate. And here we're trying to help editors understand the shape of citations. These are year-on-year article publication and then bins of citations. So all you really need to know is this blue set at the bottom are articles that received no citations. And what this editor could see is that was slowly creeping up. So they needed to investigate what was behind a gradual increase in the proportion of articles that received no citations. And that helped them sort of tune up their program. And that's it.